As we continue on with our presentation here today, we're still discussing the diverse generation work groups in different places, and so we're going to talk a little bit about the differences that we see between older and younger generations, millennials, and different generations there. So typically, from my experience, even in the workforce, hierarchy was more of an approach that we saw back, probably 20 some years ago. Nowadays, most of the work structure is considered a flat structure where people are all considered valuable to the team versus back, like I said, when I was younger and you kind of had a boss and the boss made all the decisions and there wasn't a lot of input into what happened at a company. You kind of did what the boss said, that type of situation. There are some differences in the work ethic, and that can sometimes cause issues between younger and older generations. Many older people feel that the younger generation isn't committed to work. That it's something that people need to work on and understand that, yes, the ethics are going to be a little bit different because of the era. So that's something you have to be open to, figuring how to make that work. Working attire, of course, has changed. The older generation often felt that if they wanted to succeed as a woman, you had to play down your femininity. There was the big shoulder pad phase of the 80s, and I think it was more of the 90s. Supposedly that was to help women feel stronger and bolder in the workplace. Nowadays, people can dress however they want to for jobs, so it's not as big a deal as it was when I was younger. People are also being judged on their choices. Older generations tend to think that the younger generation doesn't work enough, or they work too much, or there's concerns with them living at home, starting families before they're married. That's kind of the generation. That's how they do things nowadays. In my own experience, I've seen that. I also work as a realtor, and that's quite often that I see young people buying a house together, and then they have a baby, then they decide to get married. So very different from like my parents' generation, where you were, you got married, then you bought a house, then you had children. So, and then also, a lot of kids are tending to live at home a lot longer now. It's kind of weird to me because I've been on my own since I was 16, and it was always the thing. You couldn't wait to turn 18 and get out of your parents' house. And nowadays, kids never seem to leave. So just kind of different values that people have, and you have to learn to kind of adjust your thought process and thinking patterns with how those things are. The younger millennials they were kind of the participation award generation, where everybody gets a trophy, nobody gets hurt. There's no winners, there's no losers, everybody's happy. Of course, that's very different, again, from the way many people feel. So, and then with social media, of course, that wasn't a thing back 20, 30, 40 more years ago. Social media can now spur a lot of debates. There's the Me Too movement versus back in the older days when the woman's place was kind of in the home and children were to be seen and not heard. The young generation now is very outspoken, very able to be outspoken, very able to gather supporters just through social media, Instagram, Snapchat, all the different, Facebook, all those different types of ways of spurring debate and movements and support. Individual identities play a role in how people view and behave in workplace situations. It's important to know that just because you are from a different generation, that beliefs can be shared across those generations. You might find that you have something in common with the younger generation or older generation when it comes to your experience in life, abortion issues, the way you were brought up, if you're male, female, or different sexual orientation, views on stereotyping, and how you view your value at work. So whether like my husband, he likes to be monetarily rewarded. I, on the other hand, although don't get me wrong, I love money, I prefer actually having the work-life balance and the ability to be able to take time off to do the things that I need to do, whether it be doctor's appointments or most recently, in fact, I'm working with you guys right now on some medical issues for my daughter. So it's always good to be able to share those experiences with others and find out that other people may have the same values and ideas as you, or you might be able to learn from others' experience. The younger generation does bring new ideas, fresh eyes, new skills. The older generation brings a lot of wisdom and knowledge and experience. Women bring a set value, and diverse viewpoints bring great possibilities. Not necessarily that there's right or wrong answers, just that there's different opinions, and everybody's opinions are shaped by their experiences, and those are all important. Different backgrounds, cultures, characteristics, personal experiences can contribute to a diverse workplace. Culture associated with these factors contribute to how people solve problems and communicate at work. So we can view ourselves differently than others. Individual identities encompass a person's skills, race, gender, background, experience, and other diverse areas. The culture you identify with can be different than your race or national origin. For instance, if you are adopted, you might be someone from China, but you were raised in the United States. So your race is different than how you were raised. Again, you want to get to know other people because you might be surprised what you learn about them and what you find and what you have in common, or that you can work towards the same goals. And you want to be proactive in your inclusion in diversity measures and be aware of your own biases so that you can make adjustments in how you view people so you can change the views of other people within the corporation as well. Moving on, I did have the opportunity to attend a cultural seminar on Hofstede's model of national culture and how we can incorporate that into our global workforce. So I thought that was interesting that we could talk about that real quickly here. Geert Hofstede was a Dutch social psychologist who studied IBM employees back in the late 60s, early 70s in about 70 different countries. And so he developed a cultural dimension standard based on the data he obtained in relation to how workplace values are influenced by culture. And his model consists of 6 dimensions based on his research team. These dimensions represent independent preferences for one state of affairs over another, so it distinguishes countries rather than individuals from each other. A cultural collective programming of the mind distinguishes members of one group from another. So he felt that we are all unique, but there's no right or wrong, only that we're products of our own culture, and these cultures fit somewhere on a scale influenced by norms that influence how we interact. It's our own norm and value. Well, excuse me. What does that mean? Well, this chart and table kind of, this is his dimensions of culture point scale right here. And as you can see, there's points running from 0 to 100, and these are the ideas that he discovered, and how you would rate those different things on his point scale. And this is how each country separates itself from one another. So Hofstede's dimension talks about power distance, collectivism versus individualism, femininity versus masculinity, uncertainty, avoidance, long-term and short-term orientation, indulgence, and restraint, and what those values are in the workplace. we skip ahead here just a little bit, I've got this impact kind of written out a little bit, makes a little bit more sense. When we look at power distance, we are looking at the levels of hierarchy and approachability. So what does that mean? Well, that means some companies have a low tolerance for approachability and others have a higher tolerance for approachability. And this tends to be cultural. So each country is a little bit different with that. We see a lot in the United States, or at least I've experienced more of the approachability type of power within companies over the last 20 years or so. Prior to that, it was a little bit more of a hierarchy type situation. So each country has their levels that they look at their hierarchy, and that's how they rate on this point scale. So again, it's the degree in which employees are comfortable influencing upwards versus accepted power inequality. When we look at collectivism and individualism, it's how a personal need or goal is prioritized versus the good of the society, group, or team. Again, so that's in the U.S. we actually prefer the individual focus versus other countries where they're more group focused. Femininity and masculinity, so that depends if nurturing or power is important within that particular country. Masculine societies have different rules for genders, and there's less rules in feminine cultures. Uncertainty avoidance is how comfortable people are with change. Low avoidance employees are good at handling change, while high avoidance wants the status quo. So it's how comfortable you are with ambiguity. Are you okay with risk? Are you not comfortable with risk? Does that create anxiety for you? The long and short-term orientation focuses on the future or the current situation, and you worry about the rest later. So that's focused on long-term planning, sustainability management, and planning for the future versus no planning or short-term planning perspectives. And indulgence versus restraint is whether you have fun at work. Kind of a simple thing. Some cultures do not consider work fun. They want you to follow the rules and the procedures, while other indulgent cultures might believe in happiness in the workplace. So most countries fall into this 30 to 60 point range on Hofstede's 100 point scale. It's very rare to find a country at a 0 or 100 score. These dimensions define how people interact with others in different countries. So what may seem foreign to you is actually normal in like maybe Brazil or something. Research policies. We need to research the policies, the procedures, the laws, and the culture to provide insight into the other countries' cultures and their beliefs. We want to avoid offensive mistakes, language barriers, time changes, meaning requirements. So especially since we're looking at expanding our business into Brazil, we do want to keep in mind how Brazil would score on this scale and their ideas, and then tailor our goals to help meet those needs. Because their culture is very different than ours. They, again, like we talked about earlier, they greet one another differently. They like to be in one another's bubbles. They like to kiss. They like to touch. They're very touchy-feely. This may be very surprising to someone from the United States. So researching all that information, making sure we understand their laws that Brazil has in place, especially when it comes to women and their culture and how they view women differently there. They're more of a sexual object versus the U.S. And we want to make sure that we're bringing the values that we want to exhibit into that country while still making sure that we're following their policies and laws that they have there as well. We don't want to have any, when we're talking about avoiding offensive mistakes and language barriers, time changes, meaning requirements, the way that Brazil functions is very different than the U.S. and many other countries. We consider, if we have a meeting set for 2 o'clock, you're supposed to be there at 2 o'clock. So in Brazil, they might not show up till 4. So just being aware of that type of information.